Welcome, everyone, to our session about the European Research Council at a crossroads towards new horizons. My name is Jonas Toft Ludvigsen. I'm a Danish national contact point and program committee member working with the European Research Council. And here you have my colleague.
Yeah, my name is Anne Overgaard Jørgensen, and I'm also a Danish national contact point for the European Research Council, and also a program committee member.
This session is recorded beforehand, but the chat will be live with ERC grantee Leif Katsu Oxenløv, who will give his perspective as a young ERC grantee, and Anne and me will also be in the chat. The European Research Council, or the ERC, as we commonly call it, will continue in Horizon Europe in the current form, and we do not expect any very significant changes. So the session today will not provide a focus on facts about the ERC, but rather center on key issues in relation to the ERC. If you're interested in facts and details about the ERC, you can find more on our website and also on the ERC's own website. But as I said, today we'll focus on debating key issues in relation to the ERC. We will have some news from Jesper Sveistrup, and we will end our talk with a bit about the future of the ERC. So thank you to our three panelists for joining us today. First, I would like to welcome Jesper Sveistrup. He's a professor at the University of Copenhagen and a member of ERC's Scientific Council. Jesper is a biochemist and cell biologist. He was educated at Aarhus University and has since worked at Stanford University and also the Francis Crick Institute in the UK. He has received two ERC advanced grants, one in 2010 and one in 2015. He's also an honorary professor at University College London and Imperial College London, as well as an honorary professor Skov at Aarhus University. So welcome to Jesper. And welcome to Claus Bock. He is a professor at the Technical University of Denmark and a former ERC vice president. Claus Bock has a PhD in organic chemistry from the Technical University of Denmark. He has since also become a professor at Carlsberg Laboratory. From 2004, he was to 2012, he was chairman of the Danish National Research Foundation, and from February 2013, he was a member of ERC's Scientific Council as well. And from 2015 to 2018, he was also a vice president of the ERC. So, welcome to Claus. And then, welcome to Kirsten Gram Hansen, who's a professor and also ERC Advanced Grant recipient at Aalborg University. Kirsten graduated from the Social Science Institute at the Technical University of Denmark and is currently professor at Aalborg University. Her research is centered on housing with a perspective on lifestyle, everyday life, consumerism, and also the environment. Kirsten has an ERC Advanced Grant and was actually appointed here in 2020 to the 7-person search committee who is finding new members for the Scientific Council of ERC. So welcome to all of you. And now, before we move on with today's panel debate, Jesper has a short presentation about some novelties for ERC in Horizon Europe and also some facts on Denmark. So Yes.
Yes, thank you, Jonas. So the simply marvelous administrators at the ERC have given me a few slides to just very quickly outline what is new in Horizon 2020, and it's really not much. I mean, the ERC will really continue in Horizon Europe, I should say, in its current form without fundamental changes. The minor changes you will see is the introduction of interviews at the advanced grant level, a new definition of which international organizations are eligible to house applicants, and some fairly modest changes to how one applies for these proof of concept grants. It is perhaps also worth emphasizing that quite a bit of effort has been made in updating and enriching the contours of the panels, and that we also enriched the descriptors, especially in the life sciences domain, and that 2 new panels have been introduced in the PE and SH domains. However, I also just wanted to say a few words about the ERC and the Danish research community. If we look at the number of ERC grants that has been given to Danish institutions over the years, over the lifetime of the ERC, it actually doesn't look bad at all. Especially not, as you can imagine, Denmark is a small country. Not only imagine, as you know, it's a small country. And therefore we cannot possibly be at the very top. But actually, when calculated as a grants per million number, Denmark is not doing badly at all. This is quite impressive, I think. Only Holland and the small science powerhouses of Israel and Switzerland have done better. And those, the latter ones, of course, are not even in the EU, of course. So I think I want to encourage you to apply. If you think you have a good idea and you have some preliminary data to support your good idea, then go ahead. It's really important that you dare to go for this. And for the institutions, it's really important to very seriously support any applicant who wants to go forward, not only at the writing the application stage, but also later at what has become a very important stage of interviews. But I think I'll stop there and hand back to Jonas.
Thank you very much, Jesper, for those messages. And now we will move on.
Yeah, we will start our conversation. We'll firstly talk about the success of ERC, and I'll ask a question to Klaus. Klaus, you know ERC in details, being a vice president for years, and I want to ask you if you can enlighten me a bit on the history of ERC. Why is this history so unique, and why was ERC created?
Well, after the turn of the century, there was all over the world, in fact, focus on basic science, and up till that, in fact, for the European member states, basic science was the responsibility of the individual countries, and therefore it was not really an issue taken up. Everything had to be pre-competitive, it had to be industrial relevance. But there was a move in the beginning of 2000 about that, and very interesting, in fact. During the Danish presidency in 2005, Denmark was the sort of head of the European Union, and that was the year the ERC was formally established. And since 2005, then to 2007, where it started in the next framework program, then ERC sort of started already in 2005, formally with the first proposals in 2007. So Denmark was in fact very instrumental in that. And the reason one of Denmark was very focused was that Denmark established the Danish National Research Foundation in 1993. And in 2003, 10 years after its establishment, there was an international evaluation of the Danish National Research Foundation. And that proved that basic science, excellence in science, and individual grants proved to be very successful. And so this was one of the reasons why the Danish government pressed so hard to have the ERC established. So we can be proud of having been sort of a part of the history. There was a lot of other countries, in fact, involved. And later, of course, also, there was a strong focus on basic science, because also we know in Denmark that Anders Fogh, the Prime Minister, after his trip to China, sort of had the Globalization Council operating in Denmark, which improved sort of the success, well, the funding for basic science in Denmark with more than 50% over the next 6 years. So it was an area where basic science was very highly focused, and so that was sort of the history about the establishment of ERC.
Thank you so much. Right from the beginning until now, 2/3 of ERC's budget has been targeted towards younger researchers. Why is that?
Well, it was a very deliberate decision by the council, because the council is the one who set the policy and for the overall operation of the ERC. And we felt, the council at that time felt that young people, they were the future of Europe. So that was why one decided that originally it was only starting grant and advanced grant, so it was very deliberate that the young people should not compete with the sort of senior people, and that was the reason why that one decided that there was for a starting grant, later on consolidator, and that was because it was so successful with the starting grant, they had to divide them in two, and then so they should not compete with the senior people. So that was the reason why, and one kept that. And I think the council have over the years been very firm in establishing this, that 2/3 of the money go to the young people, 1/3 to the more senior scientists, and have not really been seriously questioned by the scientific community, in my opinion. So that has been quite impressive. I think that, and when at least when I was member of the council, I think it's still the same. The oversubscription is on the starting grant. The starting grant is where there is a challenge. It was a challenge in the first year, 2007. They got 9,000 proposals to 300 grant with a success rate of hardly nothing. So I think it's better now. The success rate has been about 10 to 15, but it's still the starting grant being sort of the challenge where one should consider seriously how one can sort of control that.
Thank you so much. Then I'll move on to you, Jesper. Can you say a bit about the success of ERC? Why is that? I mean, as a researcher's point of view.
Yeah, I think the single most important factor behind ERC's success is really that it is the scientists and not politicians that set the agenda. This ERC has no calls for what research questions should be answered. It has no preconceived idea about what it wants to support. I think this is really important. This is why this ERC is successful. This is truly science-driven science funding. I think the climate debate and the green impact area of research provide a great example for this, actually. The scientists were there years before the politicians, of course. Already early on, they knew what the issues were that could be and can be answered with science. And ERC grantees have indeed already been, ERC grantees in that area of research have already been granted more than 850 million euros over the last many years. So there's been a lot of impact delivered in that sort of burgeoning area already, although you could say that, of course, it's been an agenda for decades. But the scientists very typically will discover this much before the politicians do. So therefore, it makes sense to have a bottom-up approach to science funding. Another good example is perhaps provided by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which there was quite a bit of discussion about in the ERC, as some of you might know. And even though it's simply not possible under the ERC's charter to start pumping funds into directed research, the ongoing ERC grants were flexible enough for anyone who wanted to redirect resources to a new area. They were able to do so. And indeed, several have changed direction already as a result of this pandemic. So I believe it's this nimbleness of the ERC, this focus on simply catering to the best science and nothing else that makes ERC such a success.
Thank you. And Kirsten, I have a question for you. I mean, as Jonas said, you have been appointed to the highly prestigious committee to select future scientific council members. Can you give a bit of detail about the scientific council of the ERC? How's it working? Who is appointed? What are their daily chores and so on?
Yeah. I was appointed to this committee this year, and we started to work together. And I think it's very important work, as Jesper say. It is the members of the European Research Council who are kind of making the Research Council, drawing the lines, saying what it is, what it should be. So what we do is that we find the members of the Research Council, and we need to make sure that all scientific areas are represented. There are 22 candidates in the panel altogether, and they have together to cover all the areas of the type of research we have within humanities, within natural science, within life science. So altogether they have to represent all of this. And of course they also have to represent, they are not representing countries, they are not representing universities, they are representing research, all of them, but they still need to come from different areas of Europe. So we make sure that we have all areas of Europe within the Council as well, but with a focus on these are the people who are the strongest within their each of their research fields, because we need to have real strong researchers within their field to represent what are the ways that the European Council should move forward. So these are the kind of the way we are working. We ask the scientific community to provide candidates, so we can have a broad range of highly qualified candidates to choose between. But we need to make sure that each of the panels that are in the European Research Council are represented. So the people who sit there, they are appointed for 4 years. They can be prolonged further on for 4 years more. So this time, for instance, this year we have appointed 5 new members who will start in the new year. So we are not renewing the Research Council completely, even we are going into a new program. It will be kind of continuation in the Research Council that is important, because we have a lot of history in the Research Council. We want to keep that on. So only a few of the people are renewed, and then we look into what are the type of research areas that are needed in the Council, and that's then find the top researchers within that area to sit there. And researchers who have ideas of what should basic research be and who are broad in their approach. I mean, you might be very good at focusing only detailed on your own research, but we also need people who are broad in their approach to understanding what is basic research and what should it be. So these are kind of the ways we are working and thinking.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Sorry. Now we're move on to our next subject, which is what is the impact of an ERC grant on a researcher's career? Of course, very important for many. The ERC is a very popular and highly esteemed funding agency, and many researchers look towards the ERC, which we have also seen in recent calls where there have been many proposals, and many more than we've seen before, actually. So I would like to start with a question for you, Jesper. You have received 2 advanced grants, which is quite a feat. How did you manage to make it twice, and what did these grants mean to you?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I hope it's because my science is good, but it's also about being willing to take chances. I think one has to insist on tackling some of the big issues in one's field, rather than perhaps taking the safer route of doing the next experiments in the simple long row of experiments. This has to be a program rather than a project proposal. It's important to emphasize that ERC does not do renewals, so every time is fresh. One has to propose an ambitious program, as I said, that strikes the right balance in terms of high risk, high gain ratio. And I think that's actually the most difficult thing to do, because one would like to do something really ambitious and really difficult, but on the other hand, you also have to persuade the ERC and its reviewers that this can actually be done. This typically requires, at least in the LS domain, which is all I can talk about in terms of how you get an ERC grant, of course, requires quite a bit of preliminary data, I think, for a strong application. One cannot just expect to have funding granted without having shown that there's a certain likelihood of success. Unfortunately, because I now serve on ERC Scientific Council, I cannot actually apply for a new grant next summer when my present advanced grant runs out. So I'll have to hope that the Danish funders look at me with benign eyes and give me some money. I think that's it.
Thank you for that, Jesper. Let's hope they do. Kirsten, you also have an advanced grant. What did an ERC grant offer that you couldn't find elsewhere?
Yeah, I got the ERC advanced grant 2 years ago, and it may be not the largest project in sense of money I've had in my project, but it's definitely the project where I have had the biggest chance myself to say, what do I want to work with? What do I think is most important? And I think that was what the ERC grant gave me. So we can have strategic innovation fund money where you have to answer to questions that other people have posed. I'm not against that. I think there can be good reasons for that. But when you work as a researcher, I mean, you get your own ideas. You get ideas of what would I work with if I could decide myself, not thinking about, will this make money for a company? Will this be able to have a policy influence? Will this end up in something very specific? So I think that was the major change. Just writing, actually I decided I took some weeks out, a summer, and said, now I just sit down and ask myself, if I decide all by myself, what do I think is most needed for a research point of view from the field I come from? How should I work with that? What should I do? And that was a very good process. I think even if I hadn't got the money from ERC, then I would have got ideas for writing other proposals. So I just encourage you to do that kind of work. And of course, it's even better when you then get the funding and have this kind of 5 years time to work with it. I have 3 PhDs, 2 postdocs to help me with a project where we just focus on the core subject of what we think are most needed in our field. So that's unique, I think, in my research career. It has made a huge, it will have, I mean, I'm only 2 years into, but yeah. I'm sure it will make a huge impact on the career.
So it secured you some very stable funding, you would say?
Yeah, but I mean, no, I think I have had stable funding in all of my career, but it secured me a funding for going into details with subject of my research that is not always that easy. As Jesper said, you need to dare something. And if you dare something, you cannot be completely sure that this will end up in something. You cannot say before you start, I will definitely reach this point. And sometimes when you apply for money, you have to say, I will reach this point, and then you get the funding. ERC, then you're allowed to say, I think this area is really important, and if we get to know more about that, go into this. This might reveal something that we didn't know we were in need of. We needed to know more about, and that's kind of a researcher's dream, to be able to go into also the unknown parts of your aspect.
So a very central part of an ERC grant, you could say. Thank you. Klaus, Denmark has done quite well in the Synergy grant, where 2 to 4 researchers collaborate in a very large project. You were part of reintroducing this grant when you were in the Scientific Council. What can such a grant do for a researcher?
Well, it was a strong challenge, because in 2011, then ERC was 4 years old. They started to do something new, and one new thing was to introduce the Synergy grant, where 2 to 4 scientists could collaborate sort of on more grant themes, and the program was so successful that there were so many proposals, almost like the starting grant at the beginning, that the success rate went down to 3–4%. And so after 2 years, in fact, with the same result, the Scientific Council decided to stop and evaluate whether it was really worth that subjecting scientists to a success rate of 3%. And therefore it was stopped, and there was only, in fact, established 24 Synergy grants in 2011 and 2012. And therefore we decided in the Scientific Council we will evaluate it, and I was part of that working group and eventually ended up being chairman of the working group, sort of working on that. We were 4 to 5 council council members and 3 external members in a panel, and we visited all 24 synergy grants, which took a whole summer. I visited half of them, in fact. It was based on my experience from the Danish National Research Foundation, where, in my opinion, one of the successes is the yearly follow-up meeting, where we go out and spend time with the scientists and discuss with them. This is much more efficient than writing reports which no one read anyway. So therefore, we went out and visited all these 24. And that was a big surprise to us, because it certainly showed that the one we have chosen have put Europe in the front of the scientific area of that particular area where they were world leaders. Many of them were world leaders. And that was the main reason why we sort of convinced ourselves we will go back and reintroduce it. But it was a strong discussion, because, you know, as soon as you start reintroducing new program, you take money from the total pot, and someone had to sacrifice money either in starting grants, consolidate or advanced. We took most of the money from the advanced grant, because I think when we analyze the synergy grants, it's about 80 to 90% are advanced grantees who are in synergy. So it was the advanced grant who suffered most when we reintroduced the money. But we also realized, which was quite interesting, that when we interviewed these synergy grants, many of them had advanced grants and gave up their advanced grants to be a synergy, because you cannot have 2 simultaneous grants in ERC. You only get one type of money. So several gave up their advanced grant to be in synergy. So we realized it was very prestigious, and I think it's still considered one of the most prestigious grants from ERC, having a synergy grant, even though we reduced the money in the second round and there was more restrictions than in the first one. But that was sort of an interesting experience, and unfortunately I learned now the success rate this time was only 7%, so we might be focused again with the same challenge. How do we find the adequate money with sort of the vision of Horizon Europe is not necessarily with its largely increased budget for ERC.
Yes, definitely a grant that many people look towards, one can say. Yes. Anna?
We will turn to our last round of questions. We will talk about the future of ERC. How can ERC maintain a strong focus? And also, how can we ensure a strong Danish participation in the next framework program? I'll turn to you, Kirsten. As you mentioned beforehand, your project, the ERC Advanced project, has a really strong green focus. Do you think it's important that ERC should go this direction? Should ERC focus more on green projects, or should it still be open as it is today?
I think it should be open it is, because that's the basic idea of ERC. It should be open. It should be the researchers themselves that decide what kind of research do we need, what is it that the world is in need of, seen from our research point of view. And I think if we do it like that, then we also will get the best type of green research, because I think researchers know better. We would not have been where we are today in the green transition if it was not for researchers 20 years ago. And of course, we also need innovation and research funding, which are very specific. We need to have more efficient technologies, windmills, buildings, whatever. And we have this type of funding. And of course, we should keep on having that. But our world, our societies are in need of a real transition of all types of ways we are organizing, consuming, and producing in our societies. So these are not just smaller changes in how technologies are produced or how things are done. This is kind of major changes. And we cannot, from a policy level, expect that policy makers can ask for these kind of research in these areas. This can only come from researchers. And there you also need to be kind of maybe, as we said before, maybe we don't know exactly what would come out of this more basic research, but we need to have more basic research also within the green areas, because we are in need of really big changes, and they come from thinking in new ways. But these should be formulated by the researchers themselves, as it has been in the ERC before. And of course, not everything should focus on the green transitions, but a lot of things in many different ways, both within the humanities, the social sciences, the life science, and the physicals. I mean, all of these areas can contribute in very different ways to the green transitions, also with research which was not initiated as green. I mean, sometimes you start basic research in one area, but it ends up giving ideas for how to solve problems in completely different areas. That's part of the idea of basic research. So,
thank you. Then I'll turn to you, Jesper. You spent a lot of your career in the UK being a professor. Do you think Denmark can learn anything in the ESC area from the UK? I mean, UK is doing really well in the ESC. Is there any learnings?
I think, to be fair, Denmark has come really far, and Claus has already pointed to some of the background for that, because actually it was not least the Danish National Research Foundation that sort of laid the groundwork for another attitude to how to fund and what to expect of researchers. But I think the main difference I see between the UK and Denmark is probably that the British are unashamedly elitist. Whereas in Denmark, at least historically, it's more been an attitude of having everyone participate. And I think there's an argument for both ways. I think the idea of having everyone participate is certainly very, very important in the formative years. But once you are a research leader, a professor, associate professor, whatever, I think then we're at the point where you have to start compare yourself, not just nationally, but internationally. And that is exactly what the ESC is about, of course. It is about supporting excellence, not national excellence, but absolutely international world excellence. I think that's one thing that sort of sets the background in Denmark and the UK apart. But I actually don't think that. I think Denmark is going in the right direction for sure, and whether the UK will be able to maintain its status, we shall see. I think they will have to find ideas like the Danish National Research Foundation to compensate for the Brexit affair, and I think scientists, my colleagues in the UK, are very much aware of that, and they are very concerned about the future.
Thank you. And then Claus, as you know, scientific impact is really essential to ESC. Do you think we will see a move towards less focus on scientific impact and more focus on societal impact, or do you think it will stay as it is?
If you want the short question, no. Now you can get the explanation. I think that you should be aware that ERC simply goes for excellence, and with 10,000 proposals and about 1,000 grants a year, it's possible. And one should also be aware, ERC is only about 2% of the total funding of basic science in Europe. So it's really top-level funding. So there is no reason why ERC should go in and focus on specific area like climate or whatever. And I think, as already mentioned in the success of ERC, the success of ERC is based on its science. It's for scientists by scientists. I think in connection with the 10 years anniversary of ERC in 2017, we discussed it in the Scientific Council and came up with sort of 6 points. I think I'll mention them here because they're, in my opinion, so important for the success of ERC. And I called it that time a small miracle that ERC in 10 years have been so successful. But I think that we have heard the evaluators are high-level scientists from all over the world. It's not only European evaluating European, it's global panels which are evaluating the science. There is a very strong scientific and financial independence of the grantee. They can do more or less like they do, where they want, as long as they do find basic excellent science. The length of the grants and the flexibility and the scientific ambitions is important. The simplicity of the schemes are also very important. Then it's extremely efficient management. As I say, it's 1,000 grants per year, 10,000 proposals. I've been served by many agencies around the world. There are about 500, 600 people in the executive agency. It's the most efficient agency I've ever been served by. I'm so impressed about how they handle that. And finally, of course, the empowering is all coming from the Scientific Council, as I said, from scientist to scientist.
Thank you. And then, well, lastly, I have a question for all of you. I mean, how can ESC remain attractive for Danish researchers? Have you any advices for researchers, for institutions, etc.? You start, Jesper.
Well, I think the ESC will always be attractive because it grants you a lot of money. And I think that's always attractive for a researcher. It gives you a long grant, so you can actually do something in the period of that, and it gives you great flexibility. I mean, Denmark is small, so it's not like we have thousands of applicants from Denmark or even hundreds, but there will be very, very good Danish scientists who have a great chance. And I think it's also about, it's funny because I asked the ERC's fantastic administrators, as Klaus was just mentioning also, about the differences, about what is specific about Denmark. And one of them came back to me and said, compared us to Norway. And the Norwegians have had discussions about why they don't do nearly as well as the Danes. And they think it's about the Jantelov. And I think that's actually one thing that has happened in Denmark, that the Jantelov perhaps is losing its importance. And I think that's what we should get towards as scientists, to dare, to go for it. You're good enough, you can do it. And that you should have the support from your institutions to really make that bet on something as big as that, because it is time consuming and it is difficult to apply, but it's worth it. And I think that's really the main thing for the research is worth it.
Thank you. What about you, Kirsten?
Yeah, I like to follow up on that. I mean, the question if it's attractive to researchers, I think of course it is attractive. I mean, I think all researchers would agree on that, but the question is more if there are enough researchers who dare to go for it, because everybody know that it's competitive and you risk not getting the funding most likely. And I think from my own experience, it's very important that the universities back up. I think I had a very good backup from my university administration who actually gave me the idea. I'm not sure I would have got the idea myself. They asked me, would that be something? And having a look at it, it was kind of, yeah, that would be something I would like to do. And they helped me, because I think if you are usually going into Danish funding or more applied funding, then you might have be in need of help from administrative people who can tell you about the grants and the ideas of it. But of course, the researchers need to have, you need to be at a level where you need to have a good idea. Basically, also that's what the people who helped me said, do you have a good idea? And of course I had a good idea. I have several good ideas. And then it is attractive to go to the ERC, and I think it is for a lot of researchers, and I would encourage more Danish researchers to go for it, and then get help to do it, because people at the universities, they know, what it means and what it takes to write these applications. And it's a good idea to write the application even if you don't get the funding. Just having tried might give you ideas for what you would like to do with your research.
Thank you. That's a good advice.
Perhaps I can just add to that
please.
Actually I serve on the Danish National Research Council, and actually it's quite important that you tried. And even if you failed, if you, for example, went to the next round, that really counts for a lot. It shows international excellence. So even if you don't get the grant, it's still worth it, because it will look good on your CV, so to say. So I think that's really important to emphasize.
Yeah. Good point.
I can comment on that also, because I know a lot of the statistics. You also know it, Jesper, that in fact all statistics from ERC show that the success rate if you reapply are significantly higher than when you apply the first time. And even grantees who reapply for a new grant, their success rate is also right, but that's because they're so good. This is why Jesper got his extra grant with the ERC grant, I'd say. So, but if you try again, do that, because you learn from the process, and as I mentioned, the success rate is going up.
Thank you.
Then you want my comment to the general thing about where ERC should remain attractive from Danish researchers. And I think that my advice to Jesper and the Council in the future, go on, keep on doing the same. Don't make too big changes, because ERC is so successful, in my opinion. I was very surprised. Very recently, the Danish National Research Foundation issued a booklet with interviews of 25 center leaders of Danish National Research Foundation about their experience, about how it was in Denmark, how did they get the grants, and what they learned. But what was quite interesting is that everyone mentioned, almost every one of these 25 Danish Danish National Research Foundation center leader was how important ERC grants was from their group and how it gave significance and motivated them to work further. So it's a stamp of excellence. So I will continue with the stamp of excellence.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists, Kirsten, Jesper, Claus, for being with us today, and thank you to all of you watching. We're looking very much forward to following the ERC in Horizon Europe and hope for continuing a strong Danish participation. You can always reach out to us and me as Danish ERC national contact points for advice, and also remember that you can use your local advisors, which is a very good idea, as we've heard. From the beginning of 2021, there will be courses, pamphlets, webinars, among other things. From us, we'll also introduce a dedicated ERC newsletter in 21, so much more to come. Thank you.